American TESOL presents. All around the world, there are holidays where you get to dress up. And usually, about this time of the year is when those holidays start. Also, around February and March, I know in Brazil they have a carnival, so you can put the ones that you dress up in. In Germany, we used to have something called fashion, and in America and in Mexico, they have Dia de los Muertos. And in Venice, they also have a part of the Venice Carnival. I probably didn't pronounce that right. And then in America, we do have Halloween. So um, during this time of year, Halloween is the 31st, and there are some other countries around the world that have adopted this the custom of dressing up and then going around and asking for treats while being dressed up. So we're going to talk about this throughout this webinar, share some resources, and share some exciting ways to learn during this fun time about culture and then also about traditions and some things that you may not usually get to cover. So, around this time of year when you do have dressing up, it's okay to get a little spooky with your English. So, that's why I've called it Wicked English because you get to have fun and learn with monsters, zombies, creatures, and more. We are here every Friday thanks to AmericanTESOL.com. You can check out our online courses. We have one, ESLTech.com. That's what I'm the instructor for. We also have Teaching Young Learners. We also have Teaching Business English and a TESOL Advanced course. Any of these courses you can complete online or face-to-face. And after your TESOL certification, we do have a job placement center. So some people have recently emailed me about that. We do have places where we announce we'll send your certification right away. We've been working a lot with students in China and some other places to rush those early. So that is some of the things that we do have. We can go ahead and you can find the resources, including the slides, if you go to shellyterrell.com/Halloween. One of the reasons why it's really fun for students to learn English during this time, or just to learn in general, you can learn science, you can learn math, you can get students excited about literature. We just finished through a National Literature Month, which was in September. And when you want to encourage students to read, you can get them. A lot of students really like reading about fantasy or sci-fi, science fiction, or about horror. So lately, I've heard a lot of interviews with Stephen King, and even Stephen King's son, who also is a writer. You may not know that, but Stephen King's son is a writer, and they just came out with their newest book. So there's a lot of ways that you can get students interested in learning. I really love this particular one that by Gretchen Owocki, who I think really for young learners, but even adolescents and teens, they all really love to learn, especially during Halloween time. I know when I was teaching in Germany, the young kids would love to dress up and they'd love to learn about the tradition of trick or treating. Before you do teach, if you decide to teach about Halloween, it's always interesting to learn about the history behind it. Why do we have this holiday where we dress up and then we go from door to door and we collect different treats? Where does that come from? There's a lot of times in history, even if you look at very early documents, very early books such as the Bible, such as things in mythology that look very similar to the origins of Halloween. But at the history.com, you can find a whole bunch of videos. You can find really short videos, much longer videos, but you can see that there's 2-minute videos. And these are really great because they show students the origins of Halloween, but then they also show adults and teens what's the haunted history of Halloween. and then when Halloween goes commercial. And all of those can spark some really great debates or really great discussion about why, what is, which is controversial with a lot of society, why a lot of companies get to benefit, get to sell. It's one of the days they sell the most highest candy of the year. It's also another time when a lot of places get to sell, different costumes as well. And I can say it is expensive because even like my dog's Halloween costume this year was going to cost a lot of money. So I opted to just get him ears this year because it was going to cost him $50. So for those of you, I showed this a little bit earlier, but this is what my daughter and I are going to be for this Halloween. And Roscoe has little ears, but we're going to be Minnie Mouses, and he's going to be our Mickey Mouse. So, but when I did look for the Halloween, so I'm going to stop the camera, but when I looked for the Halloween costume of Mickey for my dog, it was $50, $60. So there is that commercial aspect of it. Halloween is one of my favorite holidays because I love dressing up and I love dressing up as a family event. But there's a lot of details here that make it very controversial as far as the candy and safety. You have to be more safe. You have to check, not only is it bad for the teeth, but it's also bad for sometimes, you learn not to accept candy and just treats from strangers. It's putting a lot of trust. So definitely there are things and issues that your students will be able to have discussions over. It's also a great time to be able to reflect on other cultures that also get dressed up. And one of the closest ones that's very close to Halloween is Dia de los Muertos. And this is more of a religious holiday too. So people dress up in skulls. They paint their faces, and there's a lot more tradition than just dressing up and just painting your faces with these beautiful, elaborate skulls. It's actually Dia de los Muertos is a way to celebrate the dead and the loved ones. You make altars. One of the ways, and kidsnationalgeographic.com has a lot of different types of resources, but it does explain one of the a lot of the traditions, and one of the ideas you find, or one of the activities that kids might enjoy, is making a candy skull. So these go on the altars, but people in Mexico and other places do make candy skulls. Now, recently, this wasn't that big of a festival. It was just kind of celebrated everywhere, but it wasn't, um, it's part of All Souls Day. But recently, Mexico City, and I'm not sure because of the recent events in Mexico City, if they're going to have a huge Dia de los Muertos festival. But they did start one last year, and it was the biggest one. They had a big Dia de los Muertos parade, and so they had people go down. They dressed like that, and so there's always there was a huge festival last year, but maybe this year because of recent events, they may have it again and they may not. But they do build altars. They build altars and they leave treats and things celebrating their ancestors' souls. So it's a holiday that's celebrated around November the 1st or the 2nd, and it's sort of like a family reunion. Okay, so it's a joyful time, even though you see a lot of beautifully painted skulls and people dressed in great big traditions. It's actually not. It's a time. It's a joyful time. People really celebrate, and they have music, and they have a whole different idea of death and dying. And that's some topics that you can even raise with your adult students. You can talk about, how each culture really celebrates, the afterlife and death. Even from the past, we know that there's different types of ways you can do that. So there's a lot of different reading material that you can bring up as part of Halloween, because you associate Halloween with monsters and creatures and vampires and a lot of different spooky horror stuff. So it's okay for some reason to bring it up then. uh, Kids aren't so scared, and you do have to check that. But I noticed in during Halloween time, especially when I was teaching in Germany, that my students actually did want to learn and hear stories about ghosts, and they wanted to hear, even though they were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, they still wanted to hear about little the monsters, not anything too scary on a child's level, but still they wanted to read about different types of witches and magicians and wizards and monsters. So definitely, or werewolves. And so this is a time you can do that. You can still study also culture by introducing myths or folklore. A popular story that we grew up with learning here, even as a young child, and a lot of schools still teach it, is called La Llorona. And it's actually a very horrible tale about a mother that drowned her children, but we learn it as children. It's called Llorona, and about her ghost growing up. So you can learn a lot about cultural stories through their folklore and myths, and these might be things that are not um, that are scary in a way for a lot of cultures. Um, we also have something growing up here. There are even stories about the chupacabra and things like that. So you may have your own ghosts and legends in your particular country that your children learn about and hear about as they grow up. And there's also sci-fi and fantasy and horror. So one of the places that does have ghost stories, which you can have during this time, especially for high school and adult students and even adolescents, to practice their listening skills, is the moonlitroad.com. And I find that when you do have spooky stories, it's great to hear them and to be able to hear the voice, the sounds and the voice, especially if you make a deep voice, if you slow things down, your students can make their own ghost stories and they can add their own spooky effects as well. They can listen to different types of stories and then record their own, and they can talk about, what are the adjectives, what are the descriptions, what are the different types of sounds that can make it spooky, sound spooky, how they can use their voice to make it deep, or to make it sound, to give that atmosphere and that tone that this is a spooky, scary story. So these are things that you can study and you can practice as well. So these are some of the great fun spooky tales that I like to read with my very, very young learners. Room on the Broom, Julia Donaldson, she's just amazing. She has different music that goes with it that you can find on her website. It's very good for children. They love that. I usually dress up as a witch or wear a witch hat when I'm reading it. So when you do read stories or you have guest speakers come and read stories, you can have them dress up, and that's always fun. One of my absolute favorites, because I'm a huge fan of Dave Pilkey, for very young learners. If you're teaching 6, 7, 8 year olds, The Halloweener. It's a great story where they do learn about you can talk about costumes, dressing up, but on this particular one, it's a very fun way. It's not too scary for children because it's about a dog. It's a dog that a dog that dresses as a hot dog. They pick on him a little bit. So it's a lot of fun. Wendell is actually from John Spencer, which is an educator online. I think it's at Spencer Ideas, his Twitter handle, and he wrote a children's story. He has different animations on YouTube that go along with it. It's a little bit deeper of a read. There's the Goosebumps series. And for my students that struggled the most, the ones, especially boys in fourth that were 12, 13, 11, 10, who just did not like to read, Goosebumps was their favorite. They did love to read Goosebumps. And Goosebumps have spooky themes, but they're geared for children. Jerry Seinfeld, who you may be familiar with, he's kind of an international celebrity, but he came out with his own Halloween book as well for children. And then some of the ones that I like as well, Miss Nelson is Missing, is a very good book as well. You can have your students design and make costumes. There's a lot of math in that. There's following instructions. There's aligning things. So if you have access to ways that you can design a costume, follow a blueprint, follow a pattern, there's ways to teach with that as well. That's teaching STEAM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But it's also teaching, for example, them to follow patterns and also measurements, because measurements in different countries is very different. So if they follow a pattern that's a American one, that's going to be very different than a pattern that's maybe from the UK. And you can talk about that, why there's different measurements in different countries and different types of English for following patterns and measuring. They can also make costumes that they don't necessarily sew, in case you think that's dangerous. They can always make things like, for example, with bags, a lot of students make, cutouts, and then it's an easy ghost if it's a white bag. They can easily use things like a newspaper. Excuse me about that. And then with that, they can also do things like they're able to make like a witch's hat and a pirate hat. I mean, so there's a lot of ways that they can make their own costumes or accessories, and they don't necessarily have to use a sewing machine. If you go to bit.ly costume infographic, you can find a lot of information about the history of Halloween costumes, how that became part of the tradition of Halloween. And that dates back even to the 8th century. So that's 700, 700s, and all the way, and then it keeps going on until about 2013. But it tells you what used to be the most popular costumes. You can compare and contrast what people think are going to be the most popular costumes now, and you can look that up, what you think people are going to want to dress up. And then you can talk about what influences costumes. How are these costumes chosen? And a lot of them will probably tell you movies, memes that come up, usually also not only movies, but books, things in the news, politics, will often dictate costumes too. So your students can find a lot of information on how people decide, what they're going to be in what costumes. You'll probably see tons of different. You can talk about, the politics that is going to probably, come up with a lot of the different costumes. You can look up sites and you can look up where they predict are the most popular costumes that will be out. For example, there might be a lot of Moana, because Moana was a recent, Disney movie out there. Frozen, there might be a lot for that. So you'll see a lot, also based on the different animations and stuff that come about. Spells and potions. So this is a way to learn science as well and to learn English. I actually have a lesson plan that you can copy, which is bit.ly/magic potion Shelly. And when you go there, it does have a talking, a writing portion, listening, speaking. So it does cover the 4 different skills. Your students work in pairs, and one student is going to be the one that needs a magic potion, and the other student is going to be the one that actually creates this magic potion. Okay, so what they're able to do is, one of the partners, um, you write down, if you're the one making the potion, you write down the problem that your partner is having. Oh, I need to make an A on my test. Oh, I'm not getting enough sleep. Oh, I have a problem with my love life. I need to get a boyfriend, whatever the problem is. And then student B writes down the details. And then what is in your magic potion? What does it do? So student A and B come up with a way to make a magic potion. They may say, okay, you have to have, for example, they can get as creative as they want. A piece of your of the person you admire's hair, a lock of their hair. You must have a red Hawaiian punch in it, or you must have a rose petals in it. So they come up with the different ingredients, and then they're also going to come up with actions because we know in spells and chants they have actions. You must crumble up the rose petals, and then you must say um, my heart when you put them in the potion. So whatever they decide, then that becomes part of it. They get to do it. You can do this first as a class magic spell and chat. So you can bring like a big black painted cardboard box or bowl that looks very similar to a cauldron. In America, it's very simple because you can go to like a dollar store and buy one of these things pretty cheap and easy. But in other countries, I think you might be able to go to the €1 store, the €1 store, and find a big black thing. The idea, or you can bring a big black pot from your home, but you want to make it look as cauldron-like as possible. Students put things in it. You can add, for example, gummy worms. Each student is in charge of an ingredient and an instruction, and you can bring the ingredients. You can bring in gummy worms, there's gummy bugs. If you go to those dollars stores or the €1 stores or anything, you find all kinds of candy bugs, and they're not real bugs, they're fake bugs that look like candy. Or you can have them bring, you can add your own ingredients. Some teachers add dry ice, some teachers add like fuzzy, like pop rockets and stuff. So that way they can actually drink it. There are some ways that you can make a potion, a science potion that bubbles, that your students can drink. And I have those listed so that way if you want it for them to drink later, they can. You just got to make sure it's not them putting anything that's going to make them too sick. And you have to be aware that you probably want them to drink it towards the end and ask their parents it's okay for them to have that kind of sugar. But we know all kinds of things. We can have like a red apple. We can have things that are metaphors or symbols or represent something else. So we don't, for example, candy corn can represent teeth. We don't want a real tooth in there. So, I mean, if they want to get a little bit like more realistic about it, then they can pretend candy is something else, you know. And then they add an instruction. Okay, everyone has to snap their fingers, and the chant we're gonna make is abracadabra, spider wombs, and frog toes. They decide, and then everybody does it as a class. Or you can actually find some chants and spells that were written by kids. This is actually on kidsonthenet.org.uk. And when you get to that, you can see a lot that students wrote themselves. Now, one of the, and also authors and famous people, but um, chants and spells are really great way to learn English because they're very simple. It's very simple language. We have eye of the toad. That's a very simple noun, preposition, and noun. Ear of bat. Okay. So we can learn different simple phrases. We can take a look at them. You can show flashcards what that actually looks like. If you have a toad, if you have a frog, you can see what's the difference between a toad and a frog. You can show them what a bat is, and it's a way to learn vocabulary. It's a way to learn English and to be able to learn new words as well. You can actually write these down in a spell book, and Boggles World, ESL.com, has a spell book, even with different types of flashcards and images. So you can print those out. They have them in, black and white here. And then they have where students can come up with their own spell. I think it's always fun to do it in pairs. You can learn the science of making different things for their costume. So if they did make a costume, or if they do want to add some stuff in their little cauldron or their spell book, they can actually make slime, fake blood, gooey stuff. I mean, there's so much they can make, and they learn the science behind it, which is really cool. So my favorite website for that is sciencebob.com/experiments, and here's one on polymer. But you can find tons at sciencebob.com/experiments. On this one, he tells you how to make your own slime. He shows you an instructional video, so that way students not only read the English and the instructions, but they're able to watch the video that shows what to do. So it helps them with their listening skills because they're following instructions. They have to listen for instructions, they read for instructions, and then they complete the task. It tells them the ingredients they will need to be able to do this, and then what they're going to do. In this particular one, they have borax, a plastic spoon. You can do this in class. A lot of times I've done experiments in class. We've made ice cream together. We've made slime. We've made something called oobleck. So there's, and you learn the science. You can teach them the science behind it. You can teach them, why mixing two ingredients makes it turn into a different type of ingredient, which is really great lessons in itself. Find so many more different kinds of candies you can make. If you go to pearltrees.com, Shelly Terrell, and then recipes treats. Okay, so that's a way that you can find all of this. And of course, you can find all of this if you go to shellyterrell.com/Halloween HTML. You can scroll to the bottom and you can see where it has the pearl trees of this information. So some more resources before we wrapped up. Well, these are some fun websites to find a lot of different lesson plans and already made printables, lesson plans, stories, songs, and games, all related to Halloween or spooky holidays. So Learn English Kids has great materials. It has all of it. It has stories, songs, games, printables. Has it for very young learners. So if you want something for 4 and 5-year-olds, it has it all the way to kids. And then there's even Learn English Teens that has some ideas for teens as well. One of my favorite things that there is available is actually a zombie novel. It is a free novel. It is a graphic novel. So it's great for language learners, especially teenagers, because what it does is it gives them different types of graphics. It's free. They get it as an ebook. It's a PDF. You can also download the text translate. You can download it, the novel in Google Books. The great thing is it's made with the CD DC, which is the Center of Disease Control and so it does have a lot of science behind it. What it's trying to show in this particular novel is how to prepare in case um, a huge number of people